Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine and this is Raspberry Reads. If you're new to my channel, thanks for stopping by. You might want to, after listening to this video, you might want to go and check out my newbie tag, booktube newbie tag, which I'll link up in the cards, just so you can get a sense of my interests and what I like to read, and that might give you a little bit of context for this video that I'm sharing with you today. So yes, on the note of what video I'm sharing today, this video is in celebration of Earth Day, which is on the 22nd of April. So I think this video should be coming out the day before. And yeah, so if you are familiar with some of my other content, I like to read a lot of nonfiction related to the environment and climate change and conservation. I have my own personal blog, raspberrythriller.com, and on that blog I talk a lot about sustainability and the environment. And so you can see some of my book reviews of the books that I'm sharing with you today in full on my blog. So yeah, let's just get into it. I've got 6 books to share with you today in celebration of Earth Day. All right, so the first book we have is an intersectional environmental nonfiction work. And this is There's Something in the Water, Environmental Racism in Indigenous and Black Communities by Ingrid R.G. Waldron. So you might recognize the title of this book. It is actually a documentary, a film documentary that came out quite a few years ago now. I really enjoyed this book. Well, I guess enjoyed is not the right word. I found this book really insightful and very moving. So this is again a nonfiction book. It's set in Nova Scotia, Canada, and it's basically a look at environmental racism through a set of case studies, I suppose. As the subtitle suggests, it looks at both Black communities in Nova Scotia and Indigenous communities in Nova Scotia, and how they're having difficulties with water pollution. Yeah, so through the case studies, Waldron basically looks at how access to clean water or polluting of water is very much connected to environmental racism today in Canada. So yeah, it's not an easy read, and it's not a fun read by any means, but it's so important to understand how our impact on the environment as humans and communities also has an impact on communities, particularly of racial minorities or people in lower socioeconomic brackets are disproportionately affected by environmental issues. So yeah, this is the first important book that I think you should read in recognition of Earth Day. It's not just about the environment, but it's about the environment and ourselves as humans and how we interact and are affected by environmental issues. The second book I would like to share with you today, and I don't actually have a copy anymore, I donated it to charity, but this is called Tar Sands, Dirty Oil and the Future of a Continent by Andrew Nikiforuk. And this book came out at least a decade ago now, and it's, as the title suggests, so tar sands, this is set in Alberta, and it's a non-fiction look at the environmental impact of the tar sands, which I should say, so if you're not familiar with the tar sands, this is basically like a mega site in Alberta that's used for the extraction of bitumen, so basically the fossil fuel industry, right? And it's a sweeping landscape, so you can actually see from space these sites where they're used sort of open pit, I guess, extraction of bitumen. But yeah, so the book looks at the environmental impact of this mega project, which has been going on for decades now. But it also looks at the socio-economical impacts of the people who work on site and the surrounding communities. And that was the side of the book that sort of had the lasting impression on me. I'm already familiar with the sort of environmental side of the crisis that the bitumen, the tar sands have on yeah, the local landscape, but I wasn't as familiar with some of the sort of health implications, economic implications of these mega projects. So yeah, I just found it to be a really interesting read. It's, even though the book was written quite a while ago, it's still a very relevant topic today. So I suppose if you are a Canadian and you aren't familiar with the tar sands, then it's definitely something you should read. And if you're not Canadian, then I think it's important to have sort of a realistic understanding of the Canadian landscape. Like, yes, it's so beautiful and there's lots of nature, but there's also these pockets of you know, really intensive resource extraction that the Canadian economy is built on. Yeah, the fossil fuel industry, tar sands, is one of them. So yeah, it's definitely an important read in recognition of Earth Day. So the next book, I won't go into too much detail about it because I actually mentioned it in my in a previous video, which I'll link up in the cards, but this is Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. So this book is a combination of a scientific look, but also oral history, Indigenous oral history, look at humans' relationship with the land and with nature. And she looks at both sort of our environmental, our impact on the environment as humans, but also more from the Indigenous perspective of our responsibility as stewards of nature. It's a wonderful book. I mean, it's so popular, it's basically everywhere. But yeah, so if you haven't read Braiding Sweetgrass, I would say out of all of the books I'm mentioning today, if you haven't read any of them, this would be the first one I would suggest you get to, because it's just such a wonderful book. So the next book that I'd like to recommend is This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein. I read this a few years ago now, and yeah, Naomi Klein specializes in looking at sort of capitalism and the political side of climate change and issues to do with the environment. So yeah, this is quite a dense book. It took me a while to read, but it's really important for understanding, as mentioned, capitalism and the connection with capitalism to the fossil fuel industry. Even though this was written in 2014, it's still very relevant today. Not much, unfortunately, has changed. But yeah, so if you are interested in sort of case studies of Indigenous land rights claims, the intersection of politics and lobbying with the environment, what else? Geoengineering and some of the ideas that were out at the time that she wrote this about sort of tackling climate change and carbon emissions. It's still all really relevant today. So yes, Naomi Klein, such an important book, and if you haven't read it, then I would recommend this for Earth Day. So in this video, I'm trying to basically give a holistic view of different topics that could be related to Earth Day, right? So I've already covered sort of intersectional environmentalism, environmental racism with There's Something in the Water. I've tried to look at natural resources in industry and the impact that that has on both the environment and communities with tar sands. I've tried to look at nature stewardship and nature conservation, but from both the scientific and Indigenous perspective with Braiding Sweetgrass, and then pivoting a little bit to look more at politics and capitalism with the fossil fuel industry with Naomi Klein's work, This Changes Everything. So that's sort of one aspect of the environment and environmental topics for Earth Day. But the last two books I wanted to shift a little bit to look more so at conservation and biodiversity and sort of nature topics mainly. So I've mentioned this book before on my channel. So this is Wilding, The Return of Nature to a British Farm by Isabella. As I mentioned in my previous video, I'm not finished this book yet, so I'm only around 100 pages in, but I think this is a really good example of conservation at play on a modern landscape. Isabella Tree just has a new book that came out called, I think it's called The Art of Wilding. I'll pop up an image, but yeah, that book just came out last year, and that's sort of like a how-to guide to wilding. But rewilding and conservation is such an important topic, particularly in the UK at the moment. And so I think if we're looking at sort of that side of stewardship of the land and protecting, conserving nature, then Wilding is certainly a popular book to recommend. Again, I can't give my full thoughts on it because I haven't finished reading it, but it's been on my to-read list for many years, so in that sense I feel like I can recommend it to you. And then the last book, I don't have a physical copy because I'm reading this as an ebook on my Libby app, but this is The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben, I think his name is. So this book is, as far as I know, I've only just started reading it, but it is a look at the social connections of trees. So I've read a few books that have touched on this topic before. So I think like Underland by Robert Macfarlane has a chapter about how trees communicate and their sort of like underground networks. But what I understand, this book is all about networks of trees, how they communicate, not just within the trees themselves, but across yeah, different species and sort of like the whole ecosystem of the forest. But yeah, it's been on my TBR for quite a while. It comes up as a very popular book to read about environmental topics. So I thought in celebration of Earth Day, I should finally get to this book. So when I finish it, I'll give my full thoughts. But yeah, it's the last book that I'd like to suggest to you to read in celebration of Earth Day. So yes, those are the 6 books that I have to share with you today. I mean, there's so many more. There's lots of books that I haven't yet got to. I'm sure there's many more out there that I can talk about in a different video as and when I get to them. Yes, what are you doing in celebration of Earth Day? Are you going out for a walk in nature? Maybe doing a litter pick? Maybe reading one of the books that I suggested to sort of empower yourself, gain knowledge on the topic, writing to your MP, protesting, yes, whatever you feel like doing. Just let me know if you celebrate Earth Day. Let me know in the comments what it is you're up to. And with that, I hope you are all well, and I will see you again in a new video. Take care. Bye.